Welcome, Cantor Brook. We're so glad to welcome you this Shabbat. And thank you for leading us in such a beautiful Musaf service. And we're grateful for all of your efforts to record this service in advance and the conversation that we get to have virtually now. And we look forward to having you this evening as you lead us in Havdalah and the Mariv service, which will begin at 7:30 this evening, at least Central Time. But I wanted to take this opportunity, Cantor, to speak with you for a few minutes and engage you in a discussion about your approach to prayer. You are a cantor, you are a chazan, but you are also a shlichat tzibur. Roughly translated, it's a messenger of prayer for the congregation. And I think that's such a powerful image. So let me begin by asking you, how do you understand this term conceptually when you are leading a congregation, a kahal, in prayer? And let me add to that, would you tell us about what you experienced, what you were experiencing when you were leading us this morning? And then one final question, which is a question that I think cantors get asked a lot. What are you thinking about when you are a shlichat tzibur? What's going through your mind when you are leading us?
Thank you, Rabbi. First of all, I'm so honored to be here with you all. It's such a pleasure. And the only thing I could wish more is that we were in the same physical space, but I'm grateful for technology to connect us today. So thank you. And these are great questions. And I laugh because we get asked that all the time. So I'll get there. But what I love that image that you set up, the shlichat tzibur. And the first thing I think of when you say the messenger of prayer is absolutely. My job is to be the messenger. And then the question is, what's the message that I'm delivering? Right? And so when I think about the message, it's ever changing. And part of our job as clergy and myself as the cantor, when I'm fulfilling the role of shlichat tzibur, is to be the vessel. And the vessel is a container. And the vessel can receive, and then the vessel can also give. And it's a highly spiritually attuned moment when that can actually happen. And that's what we strive for in every service. So I can't make up the message, but some messages that I love when they come through are, this is your prayer space, right? If I'm speaking to the kahal, this is your prayer space. And your prayer space is for you to use however you need it. Sometimes you want to sit back and receive the messages that I'm transmitting as the shlichat tzibur. Sometimes you want to come join me because sometimes the message is, hey, I can't do this alone. I need you. I need your voice so that we can raise up our prayers. Sometimes the message is, this is my own personal prayerful moment. And sometimes the message is, this is our communal prayerful moment. I say I as actually the member of the kahal, not as the cantor. So it's ever changing, but I think the name is absolutely appropriate. It's the messenger, and it's the message that evolves throughout the course of one service. And certainly throughout the course of our year, depending on what holiday or what prayer we're experiencing in that moment.
So we're going through the emotional cycle, we're going through the holiday cycle, we're talking about history, we're talking about our present day all at once, and it's all speaking through the liturgy. Exactly. Okay, but what are you really thinking when you're up there? What are you thinking about when you're up there?
Also, like the message, it's ever changing. And this is gonna be a candid moment. Because I get asked this a lot, and I've found it's most important to be honest, because I'm a human being. So sometimes I'm up there and I'm thinking, okay, I have to call this next page, or is the rabbi gonna call the page? Or am I standing in the way? Can everybody see? Sometimes that happens. But the nice thing, that the moment when you know that, guess what, Rachel, if I'm talking to myself, this is your job and this is your art. So right now, get out of your own way and receive the message. And so when I'm able to do that, I know it's a good moment. And I will say, in every service, there's an ebb and flow of it, right? There's an ebb and flow of when I'm standing before the ark. If I can close my eyes and I feel confident in what I'm singing, because as a musician, there is an element. You have to know your music. You have to know your text, because otherwise both of those things get in the way if they're not really internalized. And sometimes that happens. I love learning new music, so I haven't always fully internalized a new piece of music, so I'm thinking about it. And part of being the professional is knowing how to sort of rise above that and still communicate even when my brain is a little bit somewhere else. But the really holy moments are when everything is internalized and we can just connect and communicate and commune together.
Well, I think
So
we really
I
had a
hope that,
sense of. Go
yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I hope that's a little insight. You can see that we're people too. And sometimes we think about our grocery list, and sometimes we think about being able to really be present, because I see prayer as a practice. So I wouldn't trust anyone who said they stand on that bima and turn on the switch and they're completely one with God all the time. It's a spiritual practice. We come here, we show up. I show up, you show up, the kahal shows up. We've already done the hard work, right? We've gotten here. And so we're engaging in that practice, and that is the holy work.
Thank you for that answer. I think we can all gain some insight into you, which is exactly why we're having this conversation. And watching you and experiencing you lead Musaf was an interesting experience, because clearly you had put a lot of thought into the melodies, the nusach, the moments of chazanut, moments, classical chazanut, and also there were contemporary melodies that were folded in, and I know that we would love to know in this community what went into your choices and what were you thinking about as you put that Musaf repetition together.
Thank you for asking. That is such a fun question as a cantor to be able to answer, because it is a craft. And we do another insight maybe into the cantor's brain. We think about these things before going into a service, because a service is very much a flow and we are the messengers, right? So we also think, what's the message that we want to bring? So part of that is crafting the flow of a certain section of a service so that there are high points and low points and contemplative points and participatory points. We want to feel that we can be engaged in multiple points of entry. I speak for we as the community. So specifically for this one, this might just kind of give you a nice example of one way of doing it that worked for this week, especially with our Parsha. So when I get to, for example, the Kedusha, I want to make sure that everybody feels that they can participate right at the beginning. The melody that we sang for Na'aritzacha, you and Hazan Berkey were kind enough to tell me, Anshe Emet loves this melody. It's not a melody I normally do, but that was a no-brainer. We're going to start with the melody that everybody can join their voices to, especially when someone new is leading them. So we started with something new. And then throughout the course, I threw in some things that I know that you may or may not know. But the idea is that musically, everything is accessible enough in the Kedusha when we're doing melodies as opposed to chanting. There's a difference that people could join their voices in. And I'm a big believer that you don't have to know everything about every melody and every text to join your voice to it. You just have to be brave and try. And so balancing the Kedusha, for example, with a melody you know, with a verse that I'm going to chant on my own to lead you in so that we can be together, rising up as angels, and to then flow out into another melody we can sing together helps give it an arc. And then when we got to the repetition, just a couple melodies that I think are fun to point out that when we got to Kadeshenu, after Yismechu, we got to Kadeshenu. I decided this week I want to include a melody that people may know, may not know they know, the sanctuary song. The original text is, "Oh Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary." A beautiful song about preparing ourselves for being that vessel, for being able to contain holiness within ourselves. And this week in our Parsha, we learned that all of our community showed up to help build our very first sanctuary, if you will. And so I thought, how nice if we include a melody that has some, maybe it's even just in my head, but there's some connective tissue to the larger picture of our morning, to the larger picture of connecting us to Torah, right? And the text in that moment is also about holiness and about opening our hearts, which is what we did as Israelites when we brought forth all of our gifts to help build the Mishkan. So sometimes a lot of thought goes into a very simple melody. And then sometimes earlier in the Tikanta Shabbat paragraph, I included the melody for Shalom Aleichem. Why? Because it's in the Nusach and because people know it. So it might encourage people to sing along, right? So sometimes it just depends.
And there was also Chazanut. There was also a few moments of Chazanut as well.
Absolutely. Because again, like I said, I think there's a beauty in receiving and there's a beauty in participating. And we want to experience both of those in the course of a service.
And your reference to the angels is the reference in the Kedusha, where we have this transformative moment where when we say the Kadosh, 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 we're rising up and, in a sense, blending and melding with the angelic choir.
Exactly. It's performative in a way. The same way we perform in our Torah service, we almost all agree that in this moment we're going to transform ourselves and take place in a spiritual play that we do every single week. And the Kedusha flows right out of the Torah service in that same regard. We become the angels, right? This isn't actually in this moment. It's not, I'm having my own personal moment with God. It's, we're all agreeing that it's time to transform ourselves to pray as the angels did with the text that we received. And then we have a set image in our mind of even what this looks like. It's a very heightened moment. So I like contrasting that with letting the cantor, well, this is what I do. Let me sing for you and communicate on your behalf, and then join me. Let's do it together. And we can trade off and play off of each other in that way.
So in a very real way, the liturgy opens us up to the best of ourselves. And we're
That's the
asked to
goal, right?
embrace that through liturgy and through song and through the voice of the Chazan, the Cantor, the Shlichat Tzibur. So after this service today, when people go back to whatever they're going to be doing on this Shabbat day, what experience do you want to impart to them? What do you want them to take with them, whether it's a Shabbat morning, a morning minyan, or on the Yamim Noraim?
Whatever it is, I want them to leave with a sense of openness, of freedom, of open-heartedness, because what is prayer and singing and joining in community if not an act of opening ourselves up to something bigger than ourselves? And no matter what day it is, whether it's Yom Kippur or after Havdalah, whatever, that's what we want to integrate into our life every single day. And so if we are lucky enough to share prayer space together on Shabbat, that's what I want everyone leaving with, is that you're capable of great things. You cannot do it alone, but you are brave and you are that much holier for showing up in this space. Whether you're showing up in your living room right now, that's what we do. If you're showing up in that space and opening your hearts in some way, learning something new, then you've done a really good thing for yourself and for the world.
No question. And I imagine that in that framework, there's also a connection to the tradition, to a people, and an identity that is also
Exactly.
part of that prayer experience as well.
Absolutely. Look, I know people who feel holiness on their Peloton, right? They show up to their Peloton, their instructor says the same thing to them. You showed up, you did the hard work. But if we chose to show up to shul instead, there's something larger going on, right? We all want to better ourselves, and we all have multiple ways we can do that in this world. But coming to shul is very specifically related to this idea of transmission, of connection to our heritage, of our community, and to something spiritual and larger than ourselves that is our Judaism.
Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful experience, not only to have you lead us in prayer and to experience your interpretation of tefillot, but I think we all learned a lot about your approach to the Siddur, to being a Shlichat Tzibur, and what you want us to take with us. And I can assure you, you've given us much to think about on this Shabbat day. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Our great pleasure.
It's my honor and blessing, and thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.